Hi there, welcome back to the Ginescast. I'm your host, Gina.Annunziato. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm happy to announce that this is the first kind of dual cast of the Ginescast, where I am simultaneously, I guess, on iTunes now, as well as YouTube. So this presents a bit of a challenge to me, which I'm up to the task of presenting material that is not only visual, but also just audio only. I was writing another Ginescast, but I decided to scrap it all based on news that came out, so I apologize if this is a little ham-fisted in a way. But I think there's a good discussion that I'd like to get going here, so with that, please sit back and enjoy the Ginescast number 35, Shaving Off Your Toxic Personality. I find it harder and harder to wade into internet stuff these days, because it feels like you have to know how to meme. I do not possess this skill. I'm always 5 steps behind on that stuff, and I feel like an old curmudgeon instead of a young, shiny internet personality. Back in my day, like 10 years ago, there were only 4 memes to choose from. Not my chair, not my problem, unforgivable, all your base, and will it blend? That's it. There were never any other memes besides those. But now any viral picture is considered a meme. Thousands of memes sprout from any given source, and it can be extremely difficult to keep track of. But that's okay. I'm far more focused on the focal point of what's causing the influx of memes versus not. When an internet story spills out of the containment field and lands on the mainstream news, you know you've got something really special in the works. And for those select few, memeable. One such news story that has spawned a bunch of memes, the latest ad from Gillette. Actually, it was more like a short film. And because companies have to, I guess, be woke in order to sell their products in this internet age, Procter & Gamble decided to take a risk and take a pot shot at toxic masculinity in the post-Me Too era.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sexual
Toxic
harassment.
masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get? Is it making the same old excuses?
Boys will be boys.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed. Because we believe in the best in men.
Men need to hold other men accountable.
Smile, sweetie.
Come on.
But some is not enough.
It's not how we treat each other, okay? Okay.
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
Now, being in a newsroom, when a story such as this makes it to the mainstream, you know that it ignited a, quote, online firestorm, to borrow a phrase from my Fox and Friends days. And yes, this ad was no different. People were vehemently against what Gillette was trying to do, getting rather offended at what was being presented. I myself thought the ad was cringy and stupid, but I'm happy to report that my panties remained untwisted over it. Other people went on a rampage over how, well, let's see, problematic they thought it was. Piers Morgan quoted, "No, I'm angry at a campaign to end mankind. So on balance, quite a big deal." Candace Owens tweeted, "The Gillette commercial is the product of the mainstream radicalized feminism and emblematic of cultural Marxism. Stop perverting masculinity. Let little boys wrestle." That's kind of a perverted thing to say, I'm just saying. "Despite what Lena Dunham tells you, women are not into beta males and men are not into chicks with armpit hair." Goodness gracious me, oh my. Christina Hoff Summers tweeted, "OMG, Gillette has been kidnapped by the Oberlin College Women's Collective." AKA completely not contributing to the conversation and only harvesting likes on Twitter.com. Yes, folks, I thought the ad was stupid as well, but not to the point where I extrapolated Gillette was claiming men are rapists over it. Caitlin Flanagan, who I don't know who that is, tweeted this. If you think all men are rapists, should you really be selling them razor blades? I don't know how someone's mind vomits that kind of thing up, but there you go. Suffice to say, backlash, even now, is continuing to be nothing short of crazy. I think the main point of Gillette's ad definitely got lost in the cringe factor of it all. It was using tired old words like toxic masculinity to make its point. In the nearly 5 years since the Gamergate fiasco, we've seen plenty of articles both discussing and debunking what toxic masculinity even is. It's a term that's become so diluted that it's impossible to even define what it is anymore. And I have a general sense of what it is, in that it's the worst qualities of a man brought to light in a way that can harm or denigrate another person. But that's something that I can't necessarily assign to one gender. Everyone has that version of toxicity that can come out, but why signal it just on the men? That's basically my question about this ad, and like I showed you, there's plenty of people who have that kind of sentiment in a whole different and cringy right-wing direction. Don't get me wrong, there were plenty of people who were more than happy to say, well, if you're offended by this ad, then you're the one who needs it the most. This disgustingly syrupy, high-horsed approach to prove you get what Gillette was going for. But have you noticed, with all of that put aside, have you noticed that the right, the quote-unquote right side of things, they're the ones who are kind of crafting the news these days? Maybe it's because this administration is largely Republican, but we're no longer ruled by the left's rules anymore. I believe that, of course, the left-wing people are the most vocal and they're going to get the most airtime, but the response is dominated by the right, and it's what's crafting the news. This is exactly why the Gillette story got so big. The right wing can't stand it. But why? Speaking as a conservative, I guess what most bothered me about this ad is not just because they used a clip of Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks. Oh, no. The shrill Harpies report on the Harvey Weinstein case didn't bother me one bit. No, I was more bothered by the buzzwords and singled out scenarios used in order to make a point. Bullying, Me Too, toxic masculinity. A bunch of guys watching kids roughhousing and dismissing it. A boss quote-unquote mansplaining to a woman who looks so dejected over it instead of standing up for herself in a meeting where the guy is saying, well, I think what she meant to say. I don't even know how often that happens anymore, if it even does. There is a man telling a woman to smile, sweetheart, or catcalling her. And sorry to take things personally about that one, but I live in New York City. The last time that I got catcalled was something like 4 fucking years ago. And I know that ads are not necessarily supposed to reflect the world in current year 2019, but I feel like this ad was like 2 years too late almost. It was a total misfire in a world that seemingly acknowledged the bad in the past, but at this point just wants to move on from all of the bullshit. And just what's so wrong about that? What's so wrong about wanting to move on and not rehash things over and over again? Are we not tired of talking about all the quote-unquote problems society has to offer? I mean, I could sit here and tell you stories about the times that I felt like I was being put down or almost discriminated against by my male superiors, but I won't, because that's not the reality I live in now. The show that I work on is mostly females. My executive producer is a woman. So why the hell should I care that one time a guy was mean to me? In a post-Me Too world, something that, to its credit, the Gillette ad acknowledged that we're in, I believe that men are so freaked out over not pissing people off that they've kind of gone in the complete opposite direction. Edgelords online are calling it the cuck phenomenon, where men act like women can do absolutely no wrong. They'll completely bow down and think every idea a woman comes up with is brilliant and shouldn't be challenged. I think it's important to note that the Gillette ad was in fact directed by a woman named Kim Gehrig. Kind of obvious to note, in my opinion, but that's neither here nor there. Obviously, men and women have a different viewpoint of what they define as masculinity, toxic or otherwise. And of course, a woman can identify with what it's like to be mansplained to, or to be catcalled, or told to smile. But putting this together in such a clumsy message really misfired on those who it was most meant to target: the men. In the backlash here, men seem to have the most opposition to the commercial. Why? Well, because I believe a lot of the time, this is just an honest opinion, I just think that they were kind of taking it personally. I think some will call that a trait of this dreaded toxic masculinity, but I don't really think that that is true. I think what we were seeing is just a case of someone saw something on the internet and got upset. Internet feminists, for the most part, like to assign these so-called toxic traits and apply it to all men who have an opposing thought. Teen Vogue writer Lauren Duca is an expert in doing this, and she's married to a man. But that's besides the point. It's quite understandable that a man might feel like they were painted with a broad brush in this ad, when it's so easy to do that on the internet in the first place. But it kind of feels like the time to get away with doing that more and more, to keep painting people with a big brush and throwing a huge blanket statement over literally everything one gender does. That time is slowly but surely coming to an end. Like I mentioned before, it feels like this ad came out 2 years too late. It might not have been so bad if it came out in 2017, when the height of the Me Too movement was in full effect, the Harvey Weinstein case being the watershed moment that unleashed a slew of bad man stories. But I really do feel like we're just past this at this point. It kind of opened up a conversation that didn't necessarily need to happen. Instead of having a kind of dialogue about why this ad was so quote-unquote offensive, people just got mad at it, and they just wanted to boycott Gillette, and how dare you call me a bad person or a rapist. Thank you, Caitlin Flanagan. I know we're only halfway through the first month of 2019, but it really feels like we're doing a lot of rehashing of things that really, in the end, don't matter. I know we make a lot of jokes about living in current year 2019, but there really are some things that are happening which makes me think we should remember what year we're in. It's like we're cleaving on to these tired ideals that don't happen as often as Twitter make you think they do. We're focused on the surface level nonsense and not getting to the root of the matter. Perhaps it's not so irrational to suggest that there's more of a case of a toxic personality going on rather than assigning it to one of the two sexes. Maybe it's not enough to assign the bad with a certain gender, and realizing it's not all quote-unquote men who are bad when one of them catcalls you, and not all quote-unquote women are evil when one of them doesn't like your flirting techniques. What we gotta do is find the balance between your feelings and everyone else's. When you're so caught up in how everyone else perceives things, you tend to assign how you feel onto how everyone else should feel. And that's really not possible. If you're taking the Gillette ad as someone else's viewpoint instead of a personal attack on you and your masculinity, things might seem a bit easier for you going forward. We really don't have to be embroiled in controversy over and over again, do we? We more often than not go looking for it. And if I may, I think the right-wing side of things are the perpetrators right now. They seem to be leading the parade more than the left these days, and I don't quite think they're aware that they're doing it. But that's another discussion for another time. The main takeaway from the Gillette ad was basically, just treat everyone else a little nicer. And I will always agree with that sentiment. I thought the execution was poor, but I guess if I don't like something, I should just make my own, right? Maybe it's time's up to stop rehashing things. Maybe this will be the year to actually move forward, to live in the now, to focus on what you currently have versus letting a company designed to sell things rule your line of thinking. I don't know, I never know, but I sure do see a lot. And maybe instead of focusing on the best a man or a woman can get, it's best to turn your attention on what you think you and everyone else deserves. Do people deserve bad things to happen to them just because they have a different thought than you? No, of course not. I wouldn't think so. Perhaps Gillette had a good message after all. Because whether we like it or not, someone is watching. Someone is absorbing what you're putting out. Whether it's one person or a million, you should be, I guess, the best you can get. Make yourself a cut above the rest. And don't be afraid to shave off the toxic nonsense that won't get you to where you need to be. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Ginescast. Reacting to news stories is what I do best, and I would like to do more of that going forward. But there's plenty of discussions that I'm still willing to have and ready to have, and now that we're on iTunes, we can kind of switch things up a little bit more. I'm very happy to hear all your suggestions and your comments, and I want to hear them all. I think it's a great thing to be able to put yourself out there, because not only do you get people telling you how awesome you are all the time, but you get criticism and you get different thoughts, and you just hope that what you're putting out there, people will take as your thought and find a way to work it into their own version of things. That's always been my hope. That's what I'm planning on doing going forward, and I hope you'll stick around and hang out with me and all of us. Why not? The Ginescast comes out every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube and iTunes. If you like this video, please give it a like, please leave a comment, or share it with someone you think would like it. If you want more from me, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HelloGines, or shoot me an email at gina.annunziato@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Ginescast. I'm your host, Gina Annunziato, and I'll see you next time. Take care.